Alright, time for the re-record. I got a phone call, so sorry about that, gamers. Alright, so today we're going to be judging a debate with the title, On Balance, the concerns with global warming are exaggerated. So the rules are, of course, well, rule one forfeit is a concession, which is understandable. Don't blame Sir Lancelot for putting that rule. Forfeits are annoying. But the second rule, BOP shared, Sir Lancelot, disappointment. Disappointment. Just I know it's easier for you because pro normally has burden of proof, but if come on, man, like push yourself, and it's easier, sure, but push. So there's no definitions, and let me go ahead and state the bias. I myself, I am heavily pro on this topic. So what does that mean? Like, I do believe for sure that the concerns about global warming are over exaggerated. So to go ahead and elaborate on that stance, I take an even if position. Now, I am very doubtful of global warming considering the fact that from the evidence that I've seen, like there's theory for it, sure. I mean, I am college educated and my major is well, that I'm currently going for is STEM related. I also have another major that is mathematics related. Um, but how do I? Well, STEM mathematics, same thing. But let's just specify. I have one that's science, one that's mathematics. So I know that there's theory behind it. But that being said, the theory has changed rapidly throughout the years. When we first started talking about climate change, the first major trend was actually global cooling. If you're curious about that, you can look that up. And now we've put a lot of effort into debunking that, and now it's global warming, right? But what a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of carbon emissions are necessary for particular infrastructures, and plenty of people, particularly on the left end of the political spectrum, their solutions for limiting climate change basically amount to neutering Western, more developed countries in order to reduce overall carbon emissions, so that the quote unquote less developed countries can catch up, which I think is very stupid because you're essentially neutering your own people when other rival countries such as China are not going to do that um, in order to basically make quote unquote the world better for basically the lesser developed countries so they can use the emissions as much as they would like. There's also some other stances I've seen, which is like subsidize, eco-friendly power development in less developed countries. But when you're actually in a lesser developed country, like when I had to visit, like that shit just isn't going to work. You see about how outdated some of their infrastructure is. You see about how outdated, their methods of transportation are. And there's some modernity in their overall infrastructure, but assuming that they're going to be able to become so eco-friendly, especially considering the fact that plenty of their economic positions are not necessarily as advantageous for them as they would like. So unless you're willing to directly subsidize them, which has the same effect as reducing your own carbon emissions on your own economy, it's a waste of time. So I go on an even if argument that even if climate change is 100% real in the sense that it is mainly human driven by humans, um, even if that is true, which I don't think it is. But yeah, us just stick to the topic. Even if it is true, like what's the solution? We neuter ourselves, or we expect our enemies to neuter themselves in the name of the quote unquote world. I just think people need moral causes in order to get behind, and the catastrophizing that goes along with climate change has people become borderline hysterical. If you see the climate change activists going on in Europe, and it's a joke, right? And I also think that there's a reason why this type of science is heavily politicized. At the end of the day, people, and I know that this is getting a bit long, so my apologies, but I think that there's a reason why the mainstream establishment ends up steering right-wing politics away from being, pro climate conservation and pushes it more towards leftism and makes it such a moral imperative because that appeals to the leftist mind and framework. So it's rather convenient and rather politicized if you really think about it. Then when you look at the intelligentsia, which has been leftist since the 40s and even a bit before then in the 30s, you see the overall trend supporting more leftist talking points. Just so happens that they agree with that, and they are making the same arguments that leftists do, which is essentially neutering the West as a way to deal with it, which is rather convenient because of course it serves the interest of their voter bloc, which are mainly minorities. right? But all that aside, right, it's just a bunch of rather convenient topics, along with what I would consider to be a lack of evidence. There are some substantiated theories that point towards a type of global warming, but once again, similar theories were used to justify global cooling. And it's just going to be very interesting to go and see what our debaters have to say on that. Now, again, I can't bring any outside knowledge into this debate, so regardless if I know that a particular talking point is accurate or inaccurate, I can't be like, yeah, so I'm going to judge that very highly. I can only go by whatchamacallit, what the debaters say. Also, my bias has to be completely left out. It's just, do the debaters make good arguments? Do they not? And that's how it works. So before we get into reading the debate, let's once again go over the rule set. So we have a key arguments tab. This will essentially be null and void because somebody didn't want to put a BOP. I'm pointing to you, Sir Lancelot. Come on, come on. You can do better than that. Then you have the three other tabs, which is mainly where we're going to be having the pieces of the pie, so to speak. We have solid arguments, which are 3 points, right? Solid arguments are essentially arguments that, are very pertinent to, our way of life or the topic. So, for instance, say that we were debating universal health care and somebody was talking about the moral aspect of saving lives or the pragmatic aspect of how it would affect our economy. These are all very solid arguments that will impact nearly everybody, if not everybody involved in our current society. Moderate arguments are arguments that, while still pertinent to the topic, may not have as wide of an impact, and normally their importance can is not necessarily overstated. Like it's just middle of the road, right? So say that we're doing a debate on, for instance, abortion, and say that we start talking about, for instance, the mental health of mothers involved. Well, you can have a separate moral argument that simply talks about autonomy, right? And then use morality as a supplemental case. While it's still important because, of course, the morality and autonomy aspect and the mental health of the mother, can all blend together and make one conclusive moral stance. It's not the key issue, right? And overall, if you can prove that it is immoral, for instance, that people who get abortions, just that abortions are immoral, then perhaps the mental health of the mother can take, the potential mother, can take a bit of a back burner, right? So that's essentially what constitutes moderate arguments. And then minor arguments, on the other hand, these are close to inconsequential. Like they pertain to the topic, sure, but they're not the end all be all, right? They're not, the creme de la creme, you could say, right? They're just supporting arguments that perhaps somebody throws out there, to go ahead and try to get their opponent to respond to it. And they're just trying to, basically either postpone the inevitable of losing or give their opponent more food for thought to press the advantage, right? So, say we're talking about gay marriage, and then you bring up, well, gay people are more promiscuous than heterosexuals, right? Well, regardless of how true you see that statement, unless you link it to some type of moral issue, that case alone doesn't really have much weight. Sure, you can argue that it has some weight because, of course, you could argue that the foundation of marriage is based off of chastity, but that heavily relies on a moral premise where if you can't prove that, well, then the fact that, gays are more promiscuous may not necessarily matter. So that's what constitutes minor arguments. Then we have conduct, spelling and grammar, and sources. Now, I got messaged by an admin saying that he wants me to amend a bit about how I vote on this. So conduct from now on will only be when somebody makes a completely like offhanded remark that is not reciprocated. So, for instance, it's like, all right, I conclude my arguments, and then you respond by saying, you know what, I just fucked your mother last night. Well, then that's a conduct point. Or say that, I had a great debate, I love debating you, and you respond with, I hope you die, I hope your religion dies, I hope that everything you know and love fucking dies, right? Well, that's a conduct point. Or if you're passive aggressive, because I'm sorry, some people may find this controversial. I don't believe in passive aggressiveness. I believe in blatant aggression. And to me, they are the same thing. And in fact, it makes me respect you. It makes me respect you. How do I put this? Less. That would probably be the easiest way to put it. It makes me respect you less if I see you be passive aggressive compared to if you are just outright aggressive. So both passive aggressive and overtly aggressive statements that are not reciprocated will count as a conduct point. The person with the least amount of conduct points wins conduct. If there's no infractions or they end up evening each other out, it's a tie. Spelling and grammar also wanted me to amend how I vote on that. He doesn't want me to touch on specific like grammar, grammar errors, like say it's misspelled or something minor. He doesn't really want me to count that. He wants me to only count it when I have issues understanding the sentence. So it'll be fairly obvious because I'll probably have to reread it a few times, etc. The one with the least amount of tallies in this category wins the spelling and grammar because there will be one tally for each mistake. Sources, quality of sources. Do your sources contradict themselves? Do you have any sources at all? If it's around even and I don't really see like one way or the other, I will just have it a tie. Now, for how I judge arguments, I already told you, but self-explanatory. Essentially, let's just go ahead and say that somebody puts like moral argument, right? I cannot type today, apparently. Moral argument. So I go off of a tally system, which means I see this as almost like a game of tennis or table tennis. So say that pro puts forward a moral argument. Fantastic. So Khan now needs to respond to that moral argument and tell me why that moral argument does not make sense. If Khan can do that, he gets a tally, right? If there are an equal amount of tallies on both sides of an argument, it cancels each other out. No points are awarded. But say that Khan not only refutes Pro's moral argument, but he makes a better one, right? He makes a moral argument of his own. I give him another tally. If he wins that, he gets 3 points. There's going to be multiple arguments probably throughout the debate, probably short ones. And whoever has the most tallies on a particular argument wins that argument, wins the points. The one with the most amount of points wins the arguments tab. We rank arguments. I already told you how we rank them. So, not all arguments are created equal. And with that, let's get into the debate. Sir Lancelot versus K. Michael. On balance, the concerns with global warming are exaggerated. All right, let's look at the character limit. 10,000 characters. So, normally speaking, this won't be that long, right? Especially considering that I can see they're not really utilizing the full character limit. So let's get going. Preamble. I'll be defending three major constructive arguments which shall be the basis for nearly every point I make. Burden of proof. On balance, so BOP is shared. I win if I prove that climate scientists and environmentalists are being dramatic when it comes to global warming, and my opponent wins if he proves that the concerns are valid. Contentions. The cause of carbon in the atmosphere is unknown. Humans are given a lot of credit for the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, but there is no way to know this for certain. Simply observing the atmosphere will not give you enough information to make this conclusion. DOE explains the carbon cycle. Department of Energy. Okay. Let me look for like a keyword like don't know, do not, understand. The carbon cycle. The organisms release carbon dioxide as they die. In addition, carbon is stored in rocks. Cycle when we burn wood. Well, right here he says that simply observing the atmosphere, humans are given a lot of credit. The amount of carbon, there's no way to know this for certain. Your source contradicts your point here, because if we look at this part right here, humans have a huge effect on the carbon cycle when we burn wood, fossil fuels such as oil, coal, natural gas, and other forms of carbon. This actually releases stored carbon into the atmosphere where it becomes a greenhouse gas. So does it ever say that we don't know exactly how much? It seems like they're making a statement that of course in the past 25% of carbon emissions from human sources have historically been captured by forests. About 30% of the carbon dioxide we produce been captured. These percentages will change in the future. So, from what it seems, they know fairly well, how much carbon dioxide is being released, right? And how, like, what carbon, gets in the atmosphere, etc. So your own source contradicts you. So we're going to put a tally against you. So if that's not the case, please explain it to me, right? Because I'm just skimming through the sources. I just wanted to check for vital points. But from the vital point, it seems like your source contradicts you. This means the Earth does not gain or lose carbon, but carbon can move constantly, okay? Carbon sinks. Interesting. Vegetation releases CO2 into the atmosphere. There is more carbon in vegetation currently than there is in the atmosphere, and it is nearly impossible to judge that artificial technology is responsible for this phenomenon when vegetation is largely to blame for this too. I'm assuming you use the same source. Plants constantly. Let's go ahead and just look for plant. Between plants. For example, colonna are made of carbon from plants. Supports focusing on plant processes that remove CO2 from the environment. Puts it to more stable forms of carbon between plants. Microbes. I don't know if the source that you're citing supports what you think it does. Current models are underdeveloped. The DOE invested too much money into computer modeling and didn't prioritize research enough. This is why current models cannot accurately capture what is going on. So the warnings about global warming are all fear mongering based off predictions with nothing to support it. You don't give a source for this. So this is just plain conjecture, right? It seems that you contradicted your own case with this, and it seems like you contradicted your own case with this too, because here's what your source says about what vegetation does. So if we look at, does it like plants? So you say, for instance, plants have been stored, blah blah blah, that remove carbon dioxide and convert it into more stable forms of carbon, as well as complex relationships between plants, their associated microbes. You're saying that vegetation releases CO2, which is incorrect. They actually take it in. A big part of photosynthesis is actually taking in, CO2 along with H2O, and then it ends up forming, a sugar and oxygen out of it, right? So that's inherently incorrect, which means that I have to tally another source against you because you have misused your source twice in your first argument, which is bad. So at this point, two of your arguments are null and void by your own source. I'm not even going to count them as an argument, right? Um, and unless, like, say you post something about it later, but so far, like, you've pretty much refuted yourself, ironically enough. The DOE invested, okay, too much time, okay. Thank you for the opportunity, Sir Lancelot. Well, thank you for being polite. Rebuttals. The cause of carbon in the atmosphere is unknown. Irrelevant. The debate. Okay, if you're going to engage on that, then I have to go ahead and give him that argument. I'm so surprised that you. I'm so surprised that you didn't point it. I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be pointed out. I didn't even want to put it there. Like, what? Okay, let's see if you get to it. The debate topic in your own words is whether concerns with global warming are exaggerated. The cause of global warming is not addressed or necessary for this claim to be proven one way or the other. What? Given that A, global warming exists, I will address it later, and B, the scientists and environmentalists are concerned about it. Now it's left to be determined that the concerns are in line with how serious. No, I don't think that you understand the topic. So let's take a look. On balance, the concerns with global warming are exaggerated. So when we're talking about global warming, it's inferred that we're not only talking about the process in and of itself, but human intervention in the topic. This is why Sir Lancelot formats his argument as flawed as it is towards, human interactions in it, right? He's stating that vegetation attributes to it, which is incorrect, in that that vegetation releases CO2. Um, well, at least according to his source, right? Um, whatchamacallit, if he's talking about, for instance, like the fossilization of plants and, maybe the decomposition and certain compounds turning into gaseous carbon, I mean, maybe, but he just says blatant CO2, and yeah, I mean, but you don't attack that. Like his own source contradicts it. It's right there. It's ripe for the taking, and you don't attack it. You just call it irrelevant, which is not only disingenuous to the debate, but very sloppy. Like it's right there. He refutes himself. I wasn't even gonna count it because I just thought that you were gonna like just be like, dude, your own source contradicts you. I don't even need to address it. But you proceed to just say irrelevant to the debate topic, which is the worst defense you could have done for that. Extremely lazy, extremely poor showing, extremely poor taste. Let's hope that that improves later on. Vegetation releases CO2 in the atmosphere. This claim on its face is true. Like all aerobic organisms, a process of cellular respiration within plants consumes sugar and oxygen. What? No, what? No, 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 no. What are you doing? Photosynthesis, chemical equation. So you take CO2, you take H2O, you put forth sunlight to catalyze the reaction because chlorophyll is able to take the energy from the sun in the chloroplasts and it converts them into sugars and oxygen. What are you saying? The process of cellular respiration within plants consumes sugar and oxygen and releases carbon dioxide and water vapor. You do realize if that was the case, the majority of our oxygen, if not all of our oxygen, right, gets filtered through plants, right? That like they break down the bonds of CO2 to just give us O2, which is gaseous oxygen. If we didn't have plants, our O2 quality would be greatly degraded. Mainly because we need something to break apart the bond. There's plants, cyanobacteria, algae, etc. Like I'm baffled. I'm absolutely baffled. I thought that this was going to be a slam dunk for you. However, plants and other photosynthetic organisms, primarily cyanobacteria, also use carbon dioxide in photosynthesis to produce sugars, a process which also releases oxygen as a waste product into the atmosphere. You know it. So like what are you doing? I think you're confusing. I think that you're confusing the cellular respiration and like certain organisms for cellular respiration in plants because yeah, there are certain plants that also have mitochondria, which is gonna rely depending on like the electron transport chain with oxygen, because of course oxygen is the final electron acceptor of the electron transport chain. But I will state that if you're counting that as like the like mainstay of cellular respiration in plants, that's a huge mistake. Uh, that's a bit of a meme. But at least you refute that. On average, plants consume about 10 times as much CO2 in photosynthesis than they produce. Thank you. Okay. Okay, I thought that you were just saying, like, what? Like, I was so fucking confused. But okay, you're talking about the plants that not only have chloroplasts, but also mitochondria. Got you. All right. So that's that. So, like, let's go ahead and go to what can we name that argument? I would say vegetation, or the vegetation argument, which is fair. It is a good argument. Why is it a solid argument? Well, it's because if vegetation is in the atmosphere, well, vegetation is in the atmosphere. Fucking stupid. If plants do introduce a massive amount of CO2 into the atmosphere, and carbon in general into the atmosphere, and we are going to focus on humans as the primary cause, then perhaps we should turn it to other sources before we start pointing the finger at ourselves, right? Good rebuttal. Right? There is more carbon in vegetation currently than there is in the atmosphere. Yes, this is true. Carbon fixation, glad that you know it. There are three major carbon sinks on Earth: biomass, rock, soil, and the oceans. What Pro misunderstands is that these carbon sinks are storing and removing carbon from the atmosphere, not releasing it. Very good point. The more carbon there is in plants, the less there is in the atmosphere. So this is an example of flipping the argument on its head. Khan right away turns this to his point. Very good. It is nearly impossible to judge that artificial technology is responsible for the phenomenon when vegetation is largely to blame for this too. Strictly based on biomass alone, the sheer number of plants means that they produce more carbon dioxide on a daily basis than all human activities. But as I said before, the net amount of carbon dioxide produced is negative, as plants take 10 times more out of the environment that they put out. Thank you. Okay. Glad that you know your science. Plants have been around for hundreds of millions of years, but atmospheric and core ice samples have definitively proven a massive upward trend in atmospheric CO2 concentration only within the last 300 years. Can't bring any knowledge out from outside of the debates. Coinciding almost directly with the Industrial Revolution and the mass burning of fossil fuels, as well as the beginning of an explosive human population growth. I could, again, I can't bring things out from outside of the debate. Let's look at the source that he brings up. No, please, no, please, just thank you. Okay, so we have the measurements. Okay, seems to support his case. Yep, use the data correctly. It's beginning industrial times. Blah blah blah. Yep, seems good. The graph support. Being a science major and mathematics major, you kind of got to know graphs. Um, all right, let's continue. Current models are underdeveloped, okay? The lack of information doesn't mean that there is nothing to worry about. Uncertainty means that we should devote more resources to understanding what is going on, not less. This is the equivalent of saying there is some evidence that there are sharks in the water, but not definitive evidence, so we should go swimming. That's a good argument, actually. Arguments, reasons to be considered. Now, here's where you need to slam it home, because in this debate, you are about even just because you decided that one of his arguments was not worth it. As already established, rise in CO2 levels, not to mention methane from mass-scale farming, other fossil fuel pollutants, and deforestation is amplifying the greenhouse effect. I would love to talk about that, but again, can't bring any outside knowledge. Essentially, a giant blanket of gas and particulates that absorb escaping heat such light, photons, is causing average global temperature to rise. This may not seem particularly dangerous at first. After all, temperatures around the world fluctuate on a yearly and daily basis. Why should such a small change be that bad? Here are a few effects that global warming will have at its current pace. Ice cap melting and sea level rise. Obviously, temperature increase translates into more melting, but the effects are more severe than that. One, ice is reflective. The majority of light that hits the polar ice caps is reflected back away from Earth. With decreasing amount of ice, the amount of light instead absorbed by less reflective surfaces such as rock and water will increase with it. Ice stores carbon. As I said before, there are three major carbon sinks on Earth: biomass, rock, soil, and the oceans. This last can be arguably broken down into two, as ice stores carbon more stably than water. Since it's solid, gas exchange between ice and air is extremely limited. As more ice melts, even more carbon is released into the atmosphere. Now, I just want to go on a bit of a tangent, but regardless of about if you believe in creationism or evolution, and whether you believe in young Earth or old Earth model, you kind of, again, I can't bring this into debate, but you also have to account for the fact that in the times where scientists postulate that the Earth has developed throughout the course of millions, if not billions of years, um, that there has been many radical climate shifts that were outside of human intervention just because of these carbon sinks, right? And of course, you can argue that perhaps humans are, influencing it in a more extreme way. The same as you can argue that, extinction has been largely influenced by humans, but one could also argue, about the potential benefits for geopolitics as well. So, for instance, maybe Russia would like an increase in temperatures because that gives Russia access to warm waters in their north, which right now, one of the big deals with Ukraine is that they want to landlock Ukraine so that they have access to the Black Sea, I believe it's called. Let me make sure I'm not a dumbass. Black Sea. Yep. Um, a big point that Turkey has right now is that they have a pretty good monopoly because the Turkish Strait, the Bosporus, gives like an avenue into the Black Sea. Let me make sure I'm not making myself look like a dumbass times two. Okay, yeah, I'm correct. And also out of the Black Sea. So what this means is that, for right now, Russia is highly reliant on trade in that region. And for specific limitations, I know that there was like a whole like treaty made between certain countries and Turkey only allowed like a certain amount of warships, a certain amount of and like a certain amount of cargo. And they want to actually make a second canal. At this point, they're trying to make it manually to where they can charge for it because right now, typically, they have to make it free. But there's a lot of factors that go into it. So simply stating that, oh, it's a net negative for a number of reasons that we accelerate, what could arguably be said as the Earth's natural process or the inevitability, right? Um, is would be erroneous. It really depends on your perspective, right? But of course, the catastrophizing of the climate activists normally push them to say, no, though it's over, no, everything's gonna end, and it's all our fault. But let's continue. Both 1 and 2 have secondary effects, a positive feedback loop. As more ice melts, more light is absorbed and more greenhouse. Last tangent of similar positive feedback loop with the ice ages is actually postulated to cause them, in that more ice, more reflection, less light being absorbed, leading to more ice, blah 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 blah, blah. So this is where essentially the roots come from. It's old Earth hypothesis on the Earth's formation, etc. More light is absorbed and more greenhouse gas is put into the atmosphere, which increases temperature, which melts more ice. You get the idea. Sea levels, while the Arctic ice cap is floating, therefore will displace just as much water in liquid form as solid. The Antarctic ice cap and Greenland ice sheets are currently massive glaciers sitting on top of their respective land masses. When both have totally melted, it translates into 220-foot rise in the sea level. Sorry, I'm just checking to make sure my friend did not call me and I missed it. Even a single meter of sea level rise could displace about 410 million people, not to mention destroy industry, plant life, and ecosystems in the area. I'm feeling a little burnt out today, but I will be posting additional arguments. Well, that's pretty good for you being burnt out. Let's take a look at your source because you don't really. Okay, land elevation for greater sea rise, weather ability, okay, coastal. Let's read the abstract. Coastal flood risk assessments require accurate land. Okay, okay. We are at the first arrived. We find the word land area less than 2 meters above mean sea level is vulnerable, or 60% is in the tropics. Table land population 2022. So let's search for the keyword 1 meter. 1 meter. Estimated sea level 1 meter, which results in more than less equal parts. Okay. All right. Climate change has happened many times in the past. It's completely normal. This is not the argument you want to take, Sir Lancelot. A lack of information doesn't mean that there is nothing you need. Okay. What would be the point of devoting most of our budget and resources to fixing a problem that is unfixable? Okay, I see where you're going with this. But before we go on, I need to go ahead and make an argument. So he gave what I will call the nature argument. In other words, nature and society would be irreparably damaged. So we have the nature argument, and then we will have the society argument. Again, all these are solid arguments. So at this point, Khan is winning the debate. If true, it would deplete our cost and quality of living. The fears of this ludicrous future catastrophe are doing more damage to mankind than global warming. By driving people insane and attempting to rid of coal mining and power plantations, we are driving the risk of running people out of work for something we do not even understand that well. You could have put that better. Okay, climate change. Okay, not all climate change is equal. If you have reviewed my source around 1, you would see that CO2 levels over the last 800,000 years have fluctuated between 180 and 300 ppm. With each peak in the valley in the tens of thousands of years apart. About 20,000 years ago, the last major ice age ended. Between then and 1750, CO2 has naturally risen to about 278 ppm. The last 300 years, it has skyrocketed past recorded trends, reaching 365 ppm in 2002 and 420 ppm in just 20 years after that. The rise to 278 ppm in 1750 was likely normal and may have even continued to rise over the next few thousand years, but the rapid and unfettered rise after that is clearly not normal. See, this is where you have to take another angle in the debate, Sir Lancelot. I don't think you know it, so I think that it's just you're on your back foot at this point. No one said anything about devoting most of our budget. The USA spends 1.45 trillion in 2022. Same year, the EPA was given 11.4 billion. This is only 0.78% of the federal budget. All right. So let's check. Okay, that did they link a debate? They must have. Invalid URL. Invalid URL. That's 2 invalid URLs. So somehow you managed to mess up your lead with the sources. This fear of ludicrous future catastrophe is doing more damage to mankind than global warming. You've provided no evidence of this. That is very true. By driving people in, okay, insanity, huh? I'd love to see a study showing that climate, ew, don't do that. Climate change believers have higher incidence of mental, actually, there is a study on that. And I will go ahead and go into a bit of anecdote. It's actually proven that liberals have higher rates of mental illness. And considering that on average, right, liberals value climate change at a lot higher rates than conservatives, we can extrapolate on the data and say that people that support are climate change believers are markedly more mentally ill than climate change deniers. So, again, I can't use that in the debate, but just taking a taking a jab, making people aware. On coal and other fossil fuels, climate change is not the only reason that we should be trying to move away from the reliance on these options. Human consumption of fossil fuels is rapidly depleting the amount left in the earth for us to extract. Most estimates put oil at effectively being gone in 30 to 50 years and coal at 70. It is incredibly important that we replace or at least supplement our current energy infrastructure with more sustainable options before this happens. We will see a massive recession as transportation and agricultural infrastructure starves to death. I do agree with this, actually. I do agree that we should find other sources of energy. So this is something where me and climate change activists do not disagree. Arguments: ice cap melting and sea level rise completely ignored. You are correct with that. Extend. All right. So did I give you what you needed? Yep, you already have everything because you didn't. Many of these countries and islands have come into existence through catastrophism. Dude, no. Some of the changes in the environment are necessary for the continuity and preservation of life. So hurricanes and tsunamis are just natural phenomenons. Fuck. My son died in a tsunami. Ah, well. Sorry, man. Just a natural phenomenon. Survival of the fittest. He should have just ran faster. Perhaps he'd be able to outrun the tsunami. Oh no, my wife, she died in a hurricane. Oh, that sucks. Maybe if your wife was richer and not such a pathetic fuck, she could have gotten on an airplane to get away from the butthole country she was in. Just be better. Just be a better person. It's a part of a natural catastrophe, or people weren't even supposed to be there. It was like a complete accident. Now that I think about it, why don't we just kill everybody on the islands? They weren't supposed to be there anyway. Inferior people! Like, fuck them. If we don't do it, the tsunamis will do it anyway, so let's just get it over with, make sure they don't suffer. This is some new type of anti-natalism that I'm 100% interested in seeing how people justify, which is fucking hilarious. The melting of ice glaciers will cause a severe cooling event, and the Earth causes the water to evaporate, and there are a series of rainstorms. Yeah, he's really not putting effort into this. Many of the countries and islands that come into existence through catastrophism. Pro fails who explains what he means by catastrophism. I can only assume he's referring to the various tectonic activities for the formation of new land. Pro also fails to elaborate on what this has to do with the futures of the inhabitants of these vulnerable coastlines. Is a person on a volcanic island less entitled to care about what happens to their homeland and property simply because it was produced by a different geological process? Tsunami, kill them! They don't deserve to live anyway! Some of the changes in the environment are necessary for the I can't believe I'm agreeing with a fucking furry. Some of the changes in the environment are necessary for the continuity and preservation of life. The argument that change is necessary for life to continue is flimsy at best. Many types of organism have flourished for hundreds of millions of years with very little morphological differences, such as sharks and cockroaches. And if some change is beneficial, rapid change on a global scale is decidedly not. Mass extinction events, such as the KT extinction event that wiped out the dinosaurs, resulted in approximately 76% of all plant and animal species alive at that time to go extinct. All of this was caused by a single asteroid, causing what is known as an impact winter, which onset too rapidly for the majority of organisms to adapt to. As I already provided evidence of, current climate change is showing temperatures rising hundreds of times faster than historical trends, as well as exceeding the bounds of freedom. Here, wait. Just for the memes, I'm gonna put the minor argument. Fuck 'em argument. Just fuck 'em. Just fuck the native people. Just fuck 'em. Just fuck 'em. Why? Why not? Yeah. So it's technically still tied, but you know what? Fuck 'em argument. Just fuck 'em. Tsunami, take 'em out. The current climate change showing, okay, rising hundreds of times faster. You wait a second. Did your source actually say that? Let's take a look at your source again. Did your source say that carbon dioxide temp global temperature? Okay, it did. Although I have my own issues with this whatchamacallit measurement. But whatchamacallit, we won't go into that, because again, outside the scope of the debate. I will just go ahead and say that, the quote unquote overall temperature of the Earth is an estimation before we have this technology in space, and generally speaking, in with the estimations that we have from actual on like on the boots, like ground on the boots on the ground, averages of our Earth's temperature, it does not line up with the increases of carbon emissions, right? So again, I don't think he's gonna go down that route. He just seems to be trolling, which is based as fuck, based and red pilled, the fuck 'em argument. Okay. Current. Okay. Tsunamis are caused by earthquakes in the seabed and have nothing to do with the climate. Uh, well, he is saying that they're natural phenomenon, so that doesn't have any rebuttal. Pro provides no evidence of this. Furthermore, water vapor serves as greenhouse gas, just as CO2, methane, and countless other atmospheric compounds. So, if anything, this strengthens my point. The relationship to atmospheric water vapor amplifies the greenhouse effect. Oof. So, if CO2 progressively increases every year, why is the temperature of the Earth not tripled? The argument that change of life. Okay. Um, Negative effects of CO2 have been exaggerated. Readily available data from the governmental and reliable non-governmental sources confirm that extreme weather events in recent years have not occurred more frequently or with greater intensity. Such data also refute claims of ecologically damaging ocean acidification, accelerating sea level rises, and disappearing global sea ice and other alleged dangers. If further observation confirm a small climate sensitivity, these realities will not change. We have proof that CO2 in the atmosphere is actually good for the environment, so it's making the Earth greener. Key findings. Global warming, the negated facts. Model forecasts, atmospheric concentration, a long view. Well, you don't want to go ahead and use that timeline. Like, don't use that as your argument. Is that a chance? Developing world. Okay. Skimming this, I roughly get what they're saying. So, okay, that source actually agrees with you. Accelerating sea level rise and disappearing global sea ice. Okay, for these realities will not change. Okay. So, I would say that this hits the nature and the society argument, mainly in the fact that he says that when it comes to we don't see this. Well, I wouldn't give him the society argument. That would be too much of a stretch, because he's claiming that extreme weather is not as damaging to nature due to this. So we just need a rebuttal of this, and I would say that you know that Khan definitely takes it, like 100% he takes it. CO2, the subject of the argument of whether or not CO2 is good for the environment, but bad for the environment, even if CO2 causes climate change or not, though I've already provided evidence as such. This is whether or not concerns about climate change are valid or exaggerated. The final argument fails to address the resolution. As of now, there are no. Okay. So if we tally up the points, 3, 3, 3. So we have, honestly, like, if he would have went on like a similar angle, which is similar to what I brought up, he probably would have won. So let's tally up the scores. So we have 3, 3, tie, 3. That leaves us with 3, 6. That means that Khan wins the argument. Of course, this negates to 0. Sources, nobody wins that. So I will score this. Sources, and everything else, conduct, spelling and grammar, all neutral, but Khan takes arguments, and that'll be my verdict. I hope that you understand. In fact, this last argument probably could have been a lot stronger if he just would have done something about it. Now I could be a bit of a dick and be like, "Hey, well technically you didn't respond, so you give a tie," but I'm not gonna reward it specifically due to the fact that it is technically final round blitzkrieg. Is there any site rule? Because I believe that there is a site rule for it. Can we introduce arguments in the final round? Let's go ahead and take a look. So let's go to debates. Do we have debate rules? Code of conduct. Debates. final. Let's do blitz. Can I withhold my arguments to the final round? Technically, you can, but this is the final round blitzkrieg. Okay. Forum, debates, critique guide, style guide, code of conduct, moderation. A final round blitzkrieg is when someone usually intentionally repeatedly withholds their argument until the end to deny the other side any chance to counter them. Can be dismissed. Emir, okay, so he can introduce arguments in the final round. So let's go ahead and look at Khan's argument again. Subject to the argument is not whether or not CO2 is good for the environment, but bad for the environment, or even if CO2 causes climate change or not. The resolution is whether or not concerns about climate change. Well, his argument goes into like carbon is like one of the leading causes of climate change, and so it's overstated. But technically, your rebuttal just barely works. Although you should have attacked it better, I'll award it to you. Because technically you waited till the last round, and it's good enough. Because at the end of the day, technically you're right in that it's not just carbon, it would be climate change in general. And the topic leaves it vague. The concerns with global warming are exaggerated. So he would need to go ahead and say, like, well, what claims about global warming are exaggerated? Well, he's talking about CO2, sure. Ah, this could go either way. Hmm. I'm torn on this one. Hmm. I think that Sir Lancelot might have just pulled a brilliant move here. I thought it was going to be a landslide for Khan. Like seriously, I thought it'd be a landslide for Khan. I was such reflective. Okay. I have to give it to Khan, mainly due to the fact that the ice cap point still remains uncontested. I had to really consider it about giving this a tie, but Khan puts it away because even if we take the assumption that CO2 in the atmosphere does not create these effects, he did not prove that that has such that taking carbon dioxide out of the equation impacts global warming in such a extreme way that if CO2 did not have that effect, where the reflection of protons off of ice would cause like that chain reaction that he was talking about. So you know, I have to give it to Khan. Just barely. I have to give it to Khan. I can't give him the nature argument and even it out. No, I can't. Just to be fair. All right, so the winner of the debate is K. Michael. Congratulations.